As I was flicking through the streaming services the other night, I caught a name that took me back to the early 90s. The early 90s, the days of Vanilla Ice, The Simpsons when it was good, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the global hypercolour t shirts. And that name was Quantum Leap. And it wasn't the original that caught my eye as I was reflecting on the current sad state of Star Trek, it was the reboot. But back in the day, the original Quantum Leap lasted for 4 years between 1989 and 1993 and about 100 episodes. So the original starred Scott Bakula, later seen as the captain in Star Trek Enterprise, as Dr. Sam Beckett, a scientist trying to build a time machine. But his time machine's not working. So, with the threat of government funding being pulled, one day he steps into the machine and leaps. Leaps being the term for travelling through time. But Sam's not alone. He's supported by Admiral Al Calavici, who appears as a hologram with a flashing hand console, a big cigar, and, in my memory at least, some incredibly loud shirts. The hand console was connected to Ziggy, the supercomputer, who gives Sam the potted biography of the person he's leapt into, as well as what he has to do to complete the leap. So Sam Beckett doesn't just travel in time, he travels into the body of another person. It's never quite clear exactly how this happens. Do they swap bodies completely? Do they swap brains? Do they swap consciousness? And what happens to the other person? It's referred to several times that the person Sam leaps into is waiting in a room somewhere. Is there some kind of psychological counselling and support for this person? How does that work? So Sam Beckett leaps into all sorts of people: soldiers, pilots, sportsmen, women, children, firefighters, musicians, priests, and at one point even himself. And the idea of the show is that in each episode, Sam and Al and Ziggy have to work out what they have to make better so that Sam can leap again and hopefully come home. So they might have to improve the life of the person they've leapt into. It might be the life of someone around them instead. The original Quantum Leap ran for almost 100 episodes. And after a certain point, you have to ask, who's directing these leaps? Which is a question that the show poses, but perhaps cleverly doesn't answer. So is it Ziggy? Does Ziggy, the supercomputer, just not know how to bring Sam home, so he keeps leaping? Is it Sam himself directing the leaps somehow? Is it God, perhaps? This is something that the show looked at in its final episode, but never quite answered. At one point in the series finale, Sam Beckett gets told he can go home anytime he wants. But then we get told he never did. Speaking of that final episode, it's not just Star Trek Enterprise that is a terrible final episode that stars Scott Bakula. Don't know what's going on there. Sure, it's not his fault. So Quantum Leap was like family-friendly, fun, light sci-fi. The same kind of vibe as Stargate SG-1 would have later. The show started in 1989 and in-universe was set in 1995. One little detail which I laugh now looking back on is that to show that Al was living in the future, he would have a CD player in his car. But what about the reboot? Does it match up to the original? Is it going to be worth watching? Well, a lot of the same elements are there. You've got the main character, who is an extremely highly qualified, extremely intelligent scientist. You've got the hologram who assists him. This time it's his fiancée. The original Quantum Leap didn't go there quite as quickly as this show had. You've also got other legacy elements as well. For example, you've got Al's daughter who is in there. I've only watched the first 3 episodes. We've already seen the classic flashing console, which has been jangled in front of my eyes like the nostalgia bait that it is, and I loved it. Also, I like the unclear motivations that they've given the new guy for putting himself into the machine and leaping. In the original, it's just stated that the government were going to pull funding and so Sam Beckett goes and leaps for that reason. However, in the new one, Ben Song isn't supposed to be the leaper at all. It's supposed to be his fiancée. Something happens near the beginning of the pilot. He receives a message from somebody, and then he goes to the facility where they're working, screws with the security cameras, and leaps. So I think that's an interesting addition. I've watched the first 3 episodes and they're absolutely fine. Like I say, it's kind of the light, fun Stargate SG-1 sort of science fiction. So if that's your kind of thing, check it out. But for me, it's not going to be on the top of my viewing list. Thanks for watching.
I'm retarded?